I'm J.R. Church. Welcome to today's webcast. Running a little late today because we've had a problem over in our other building. The pipes froze overnight a couple of nights ago and over the weekend and flooded the building with water. So we've got a lot of damage over there. We've got people over there fixing things up. We've got about 40 fans going and a company who's come in to dry out the building. It's a mess. Pray for us. Pray that the Lord will have His way in it. And I suppose it is the Lord's will. We sure didn't know it was coming when all this cold weather settled in on us here in Oklahoma. We're not the only building that's had pipes break, however, and that's comforting to know. On today's broadcast, I would like to talk to you about human beings being beings of light. There's a gentleman by the name of Professor Pop, and he began to study light. And one of his students came to him by the name of Ruth, and Bernard Ruth, and asked Pop to supervise his work for his doctoral dissertation. So Pop told Mr. Ruth that he was prepared to do so if the student could show that light emanated from the human body. Well, this meeting was fortuitous for Pop because Ruth happened to be an excellent experimental physicist. Mr. Ruth thought the idea was ridiculous and immediately set to work building an experiment to prove Pop's hypothesis wrong. Professor Pop had discovered that when he puts ultraviolet light onto a cancer cell, that the cancer cell absorbs the ultraviolet light, scrambles it, and re-emits it at a different frequency. Normal cells absorb the ultraviolet light and re-emit it or emit it on the same frequency. And so within 2 years, Mr. Ruth had constructed a machine resembling a big X-ray detector which used photomultipliers to count light photon by photon. Even today, it is still one of the best pieces of equipment in the field, he writes. The machine had to be highly sensitive because it had to measure what Pop assumed would be extremely weak emissions. Well, in 1976, they were ready for their first test with cucumber seedlings. The photomultiplier showed that photons, or light waves, of a surprisingly high intensity were being emitted from the seedlings. In case the light had to do with an effect of photosynthesis, they decided that their next test with potatoes would be to grow the seedling plants in the dark. This time, when the seedlings were placed in the photomultiplier, they registered an even higher intensity of light. What's more, the photons in the living system they examined were more coherent than anything they had ever seen. Professor Pop began to thinking about light in nature. Light was present in plants, was used in photosynthesis. When we eat plant foods, he thought, it must be that we take up the photons and store them. When we consume broccoli, for example, and digest it, it's metabolized into carbon dioxide and water, plus the light stored from the sun and photosynthesis. We extract the CO2, eliminate the water, but the light is an electromagnetic wave and must be stored. When taken in by the body, the energy of these photons dissipates and becomes distributed over the entire spectrum of electromagnetic frequencies, from the lowest to the highest. The energy is the driving force for all molecules in our body. Before any chemical reaction can occur, at least one electron must be activated by a photon with a certain wavelength and enough energy. The biochemist and Nobel Prize-winning Leininger mentions in his textbook that some reactions to the living cell happen a lot faster than what compounds to 37 degrees centigrade temperature. The explanation seems to be that the body purposely directs chemical reactions by means of electromagnetic vibrations or biophotons. You know what he's saying here? He's saying that we have trillions of cells in our bodies and that those cells speak to each other using light. Just as a computer speaks using, shall we say, laser light or electrons flowing over copper wires, our molecules, the DNA, talks to each other using ultraviolet light.